there's a high bar already. So I'm thinking about how big is your world? How big does your world have to be? For a long time, when I was younger, I used to look at people who had succeeded. You know, I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be a famous artist. I wanted to be a famous novelist. And as you get older, you know, two things happen. And one is you realize that that doesn't seem to be taking place. And the other thing is, at least in my case, I started to realize how much work it was. Like, if you wanted to actually, you know, reach that level, you were going to have to do things. It wasn't just going to happen. And so, you know, I kind of started to lose interest. And, you know, well, that's okay. You know, but still, you know, if you were J.K. Rowling, if you were Beyonce, your world would be the world, right? You know, there wouldn't be any place you would go that people wouldn't know who you were and what you had done. But, you know, that's not my situation. My world, you know, seems pretty small sometimes. Well, the other day, I picked up this CD, and it was not by Beyonce. It was actually a sampler of prog metal bands from the early 2000s. And I just found this around. Presumably it had belonged to my son, and I kind of remembered enjoying it. So, you know, I plugged it into the car, and I'm driving along, and I'm listening to these songs you've never heard of by these bands you've never heard of, and they are great. They're beautiful. They're like, I'm singing along. I'm really enjoying this, and I was kind of not having the greatest day, you know, and this album's like really turning my attitude around, and I started thinking, I wonder what these guys are doing now, you know? It's like 10 years later, and like they never were that big to begin with, and probably by now they're all like selling cars or something. And, you know, did they look back and say, oh, you know, that was a neat moment in my life. I played a few bars. I was on a sampler CD. You know, it was fun. And now, you know, I've moved on. Or did they look back and say, oh, you know, we were almost there. You know, we just got screwed by the label, or whatever stories people tell themselves, you know, about how things went south. I thought, I am sure whatever they think about those times in their life, whatever they are doing now, one thing they are not thinking is they are not thinking that some 52-year-old woman is driving her Mazda and, you know, doing this at the stoplight. But it's, you know, they have brought something really neat into my life. And it got me started thinking about all the art on my walls that I like picked up at Yellow Springs or at some craft fair in some town I was in for one day, and like I can't read the artist's signature anymore, but you know, I look at it every day and it brings me a lot of pleasure. Or you know, I think about, I guess then I started to turn it around and I started to think about all the art that I sold at craft fairs that, you know, I don't know what happened to it. Or all the garage bands that my friends were in. And, you know, I started thinking about the Dangeros and Slow-Mo and the Gilroys and all these old local bands that are no more, but that brought a lot of people a lot of pleasure, and that still do, you know, when they come around on my iTunes. So I started thinking about being here. We tell these stories, and they go out into the ether, you know, we become the 1,000,000,003rd video on YouTube. Is anybody ever going to see it besides our mothers? But we don't know, you know, and it just made me think that even though my world is not global, my world doesn't look very big, we don't really know how big our worlds are. Great.